Alrighty, folks. Episode 100 today. Let's get to the first question.
Do you plan on training good mornings to failure? I see most people doing them with high reps or using RIR/RPE. Neither. I basically plan on training them the exact same way that I train every other single movement, which is using simultaneous double progression. The only thing about good mornings is that they are a lift that you can't really take to true failure. You have to use technical failure because your back will start to round and you will start using, your quads well before you actually fail the movement. What does the term SFR mean? SFR is stimulus to fatigue ratio, and it refers to the amount of fatigue that a movement generates versus the amount of stimulus that it provides. For example, the classic example that we talk about is deadlifts. Deadlifts provide an enormous global stimulus, but they don't train any one particular muscle group optimally, and they create a ton of fatigue for the stimulus that they do provide. So when you are newer to training and you are not quite that strong yet, deadlifts might have a great stimulus to fatigue ratio because they get multiple muscles to grow. They make almost your entire body grow. And because you're not that strong yet, the central fatigue is less than for somebody who has to do 600 plus pounds for reps. However, when you are advanced and you are deadlifting 500 or 600 for reps, now it doesn't provide a very specific stimulus to any one muscle while also making you very fatigued. So when an individual becomes highly advanced, they might opt for a different hip hinge that does train particular musculature optimally. For example, an RDL can be performed in such a way as to maximally target the hamstrings or the glutes, and because you're doing it in a more strict bent over way, it significantly reduces the total load you use, thus improving SFR. Now, one thing that I wanted to take the opportunity to clarify with this question was, a lot of you seem to be under the impression that a movement will always have a better SFR if it causes less fatigue. However, if you take that logic to its end extreme, that would mean that isolation exercises are always better than compounds. So the best chest exercise in terms of SFR would be a chest fly. It has a deep stretch. It doesn't target any other muscles. It uses the lowest load for the chest. Therefore, all isolations have a better SFR than compounds, right? Wrong. And if you talk to pretty much any experienced lifter, what you will find is that they agree that even though compounds cause significantly more fatigue in most cases than isolation exercises, they cause proportionally more stimulus. And currently there's no explanation for this in the literature, but we can only assume that something about compounds provides more mechanical tension to the prime movers because of the loads that you are using in a given movement. So that in mind, a lot of you need to stop making this mistake, assuming that all compounds need to be immediately modified to the most mechanically disadvantageous version of that movement when you are a beginner. When you are still deadlifting 2 plates, even 3 plates, that does not have a bad SFR for you. And in fact, it's probably hypertrophying like 8 or 9 different muscles. The stronger you get, the more you need to rely on mechanically disadvantageous versions because you're no longer going to be able to recover and you're not growing 8 or 9 muscles anymore, you're growing 2. But SFR is something that changes over your training career even on a given movement. Stop trying to be more advanced than you really are because you are selling yourself short. Do you have different calories/macros on training days versus non-training days? Barely, just barely, because on training days I have an intra-workout shake, which is like 200 calories, and I don't have that on non-training days. So there is a 200 calorie difference. In general, I don't think that having different targets on training versus non-training days is worth the added complexity, but the one exception might be that if you are significantly hungrier on training days and it helps adherence, then yeah, put a little bit more calories on your training days. Thoughts on maintaining at a bulked state versus slowly bulking for hypertrophy. I don't know if you even realize this, but you've already asked me a maingaining question. And I literally answered a maingaining question 10 hours before you asked this question. So by now you could have already tried it and determined for yourself whether or not you like it. But here's what I see when I read this question. Unless you are a strongman or a power lifter or somebody who is looking for absolute strength and you don't care if you're fat constantly, this just reads to me like somebody who's looking for an easy way out and doesn't want to cut. Get your discipline together and diet. Is there a relationship between your natural appetite level and the ability to put on muscle mass? No. Generally speaking, people that have no ability to regulate their appetite usually have poor genetics for hypertrophy and bodybuilding. However, there is definitely going to be a correlation, and that's because a huge amount of people simply can't eat enough for hypertrophy. At the higher levels of bodybuilding, especially enhanced, I would say it's actually more common to run into people who have trouble eating enough than it is to run into people who can't control their appetite. So there's definitely somewhat of an advantage if you get large enough muscularly, because you're never going to be one of these people that's limited by appetite. And again, that's just so common. It's so common. And for people to just not be able to eat enough to gain weight, it blows my mind, but it's true. But like I said, no, there's probably no actual relationship here, even though there is going to be a correlation. And in general, having a higher body fat and poor appetite control is not a good sign that you'll be able to get very lean for bodybuilding. Can you give some tips for the post-fat loss phase? I always mess up my reverse diet, maintaining phase. So the biggest thing is you have to mentally make a change where when you reach your goal weight, you're not done dieting. You're maybe halfway, 2/3 of the way, but now you need to go through the reverse dieting phase, or at least the maintenance phase. And that means do not go celebrate with cheat meals, for one. Two, let's say you've added 5 or 6 or 700 calories to your daily allotment because you've gone from losing like 1.5 pounds a week to immediately going to maintenance. Do not start looking for ways to put in candy and chips and pizza and hot dogs and other tasty processed snacks. Your diet is not over yet. If you're one of these people that has a crazy appetite that gets out of control and you're prone to binges, do not introduce high palatability foods. High reward, high palatability foods are likely to trigger binges. You need to fill up that 500 to 700 calories with fruits, even more vegetables than you were eating at the peak of your diet, and highly satiating carb sources like potatoes. Treat it like you're still dieting and you'll have a lot more success. How to balance bodybuilding with other sports, i.e. wrestling. So honestly, the best person to ask this question to would for sure be Trevor instead of me. Trevor is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu and trains with weights more than 6 times per week. But the gist of it is going to be this. One, you just do both, man. Like, if you're committed to both, you just do both. And after a while, you will get a sense of what works and what doesn't, what's recoverable and what isn't, by actually trying things and making adjustments. But the second thing is that you are absolutely going to have to moderate the intensity of both your training sessions by picking high SFR movements, by using RAR and RPE, and ensuring that you're not generating too much fatigue. But the same thing goes for your rolling, especially live rolls. You cannot go 100% in every single one, or you're going to burn yourself out very, very quickly. How long did it take you to bench 2 plates and to squat 2 plates? Well, preface here, I took weightlifting class in both junior high when I was 13 years old, and then I took weightlifting in high school as well, both I think when I was 16 and 17. And granted, while that was only like 3 months out of the year in each case rather than like a year-long class, it gave me a significant head start. And I'm pretty sure I squatted 2 plates to very, very questionable depth when I was like 15 or 16 years old in PE class, like while we were all egging each other on to just max out. The very first time I ever bench pressed 225, I actually got it for a set of 5 on the starting strength program, and I believe that was something like 7 or 8 months into structured training. And likewise, as far as 225 to depth, I squatted that on starting strength in the first month. Alrighty, folks, that is going to be it for today's Q&A. As always, if you enjoy the Q&As, please remember to like the video when it comes out on YouTube. If you'd like to become a supporter of the Q&A on Patreon for $1 a month, I'll throw up a link here and in the description box on YouTube. DM me or email me if you're interested in coaching, and the links to my ebooks are going to be in my bio on Instagram and in the description box on YouTube. So the overwhelming sentiment for what to do for episode 100 was some sort of an eating challenge, but I am not going to do that today because I do not have an available free meal this week. So I will do that at some point, though.
whether it's the 100 chicken nuggets or some other disgusting eating challenge, if I can even think of anything more disgusting than that one. So we will do that at some point. It just is not today, unfortunately. So I will be back on Friday for episode 101. See you then. Enjoy the rest of your week.